Welcome to Scale Your Empire, the podcast that elevates your business game. Meet your guides to greatness. Your hosts, Dershan and Regin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Scale Your Empire. And we have a very special guest here today, Mark Engelmann. And, we've known Mark for a while. One of the amazing things about Mark and his wife is that they have an amazing business, a BPO in the Philippines, and they actually started it, scaled it, and exited that business. So something which are very few entrepreneurs, a lot of people want to do that, but not many people actually end up doing all the three steps of a business. So congratulations, Mark, on doing that. And then now you have an amazing business, Flipside Group, which actually trains and coaches people on exactly how to do the same thing. And Mark coaches many entrepreneurs, high-level entrepreneurs, how to do that. So thanks for your time, Mark. And, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Reggie. Thanks, Dash. It's great to be here.
Welcome to the podcast. It's going to be an awesome time.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. Mark, look, we just want to start off. We're going to talk a fair bit on scaling and, a mindset of scaling and that sort of stuff, because, most of the listeners we have, they are into the scaling phase and they probably already have a business and looking to take it to the next level, obviously. So one of the first things I want to talk about is in those early days when you just started and when you're slowly getting attraction, there was probably something stopping you to really scale. It could be a mindset or it could be finances or whatever. What was those early days, if you could go back, and what stopped you from scaling? I know you scaled up to 400 to 500 people. Yeah, what was that stopping you initially, you reckon?
Leads.
Okay.
Pretty much. So when we first started the business, we had no marketing function really at all. We basically sold to our network and our network's network and our network's network. And then after about 12 months, we had fully saturated our network. And I think everyone we knew was sick of talking to us about outsourcing. But in that year, we'd grown to 150 staff, which at the time was quite quick. But then we'd saturated all of our personal connections and professional connections. And we got to a point where we were looking at each other and we said, how do we get more leads? We need to find more people to sell to. And that's when we started to test and trial different tactics. And the first thing that we tested and trialed was outbound calling. So we just acquired a list of, a few tens of thousands of businesses. And we started appointment setting out of the Philippines. And for about 4 months, I drove around Southeast Queensland going to appointments that either were no-shows or they were there, but they had no idea who I was and what I was going to talk to them about. And I think in that 4 months, I closed nothing. Wow. I didn't even get any hot or warmish kind of leads to nurture through that process. So I won't say it was a waste of time. It wasn't a waste of time. We learned a lot. But what we did learn was that particular strategy for us wasn't working. So we had to change things up again. And that's when we started reading about inbound marketing, content marketing, and we started to build a content engine in the business. We started to resource around that marketing function, and over time, we started to see a nice, consistent amount of good quality leads coming through. And over the 6 years that we owned that business, we kind of transitioned away from outbound calling and focused 100% on inbound.
Wow, that's amazing. And not many people have that patience to just change. The foresight to change. If it's not working, they just keep going and keep trying the same thing. So the other thing, to creating inbound leads, it takes a little bit of extra time, more patience. So what was your thought process that, obviously it's a long-term strategy, not a quick win. So what was going on through your head when you were making that transition? And, obviously there's no guarantee it's going to work as well. So how did you do that?
Well, what was going through our head at the time was what we're currently doing is not working. So we need to try something else. And we didn't know if the inbound method would work or not, but all we knew was that we needed to try something else. And in the absence of any other kind of ideas, we settled on the inbound methodology, and in particular, HubSpot's inbound methodology. And, I coach and I work with a lot of clients these days in Flipside Group on how to implement an inbound content-driven lead generation engine in their business and how to build that and resource it. And one of the first conversations I have with clients is, look, this is going to take at least 12 months before we get really good traction and start seeing results. So you need to be committed to invest in this 12 months at least before we go through a review period and work out whether or not this is working or not. So, and the same thing happened in our business. I just thought, okay, let's do it. I started writing heaps of content, heaps of blogs. I didn't really have much structure or framework around that content strategy. I just thought, you know what? What's our audience going to be interested in? These are the sorts of objections we get when we have sales conversations. These are the sorts of things that we do differently to our competitors. I'm just going to write about that. And then, so I just started writing heaps of content about that in the form of blogs. And then I started writing downloadable pieces of content, gated content, or like guidebooks and things about how to successfully integrate offshore staff into your business and those sorts of things. And then we let that roll and we pushed some advertising budget behind that to get some traffic and eyes on those pages and those resources. And we started to get some traction over time. But it wasn't until we really had a look at our overall marketing strategy that we started to see real success. And what we did at that point was we started to really look at, well, who do we want to be our customers? Because while we were scaling the front end of the business, the marketing side, we were seeing service failures appearing and cracks appearing in the service side of the business or the operations side of the business. And the reason that was happening is because we had customers across all sorts of industries that were all sorts of sizes, from, you know, small business to medium business to listed companies. And it was getting really hard to kind of manage all of those accounts. If all of our accounts were the same, looked and felt the same, then we could systemize the account management section of the business. And in order to do that, we need to sell and market to the same sorts of companies. And that's when we started to look at different industry verticals and how can we differentiate ourselves from our competitors. And then we settled on the real estate industry after we'd gone through a fair bit of work trying to identify, well, which industries would benefit the most from offshore staff and outsourcing. We settled on real estate. We started directing all of our content towards that industry vertical. And we started tailoring our content and talking about, you know, how to integrate offshore staff into a real estate office, the benefits of outsourcing for real estate, how to build an offshore sales support team for your real estate agency, all that sort of stuff. But in addition to that, so we always need to remember when it comes to marketing that digital marketing is like the foundation. We have our website. It's our best digital asset for marketing. We need to put a lot of work and investment into that to make sure that it converts traffic to leads, good quality leads. But in addition to that, there's a multi-channel marketing approach that needs to happen as well. So while we were doing that online play with content marketing, we were developing relationships with industry publications. We were advertising in those publications, writing editorials. We were going to conferences and exhibiting at conferences. We were speaking. We were getting our BDMs to go to franchise strategy days and things to talk about how offshoring and outsourcing could be a solution. So we did all of this face-to-face stuff as well as pushing the digital side of things. And it got to a point where we would get feedback from the industry that we were marketing to, you know, that people would be saying, we see you guys everywhere. We see your logo everywhere. We see your photos in magazines. Attached to editorials you've written. We get targeted on Facebook and Instagram. We see posts on LinkedIn. You're everywhere. And so it was a really a bit of an eye-opener for us in terms of, well, this is how you develop brand awareness and this is how you position yourself as an expert in your market. And had we not niched into a particular industry vertical, it would have been far too hard for us to get good brand awareness and build that trust with our audience. So I think that, you know, we started off with our content marketing and our marketing play quite sort of piecemeal without much direction or strategy or framework. But over time, we narrowed that scope and we put a lot more structure around what we were doing. And in the end, we saw a lot of success.
Awesome, Mark. Especially like niching down, most people would have a lot of challenges with that. They want to be everything to everyone, and really the business scales, like, you know, grow from there. So just leading to that, what do you think were some of the mistakes that you made early on in the business And what were some of the learnings from that really helped you?
Lots of mistakes. I think some of the biggest mistakes would have been things like expecting or understanding, thinking that the Australian market would respond well to offshore appointment setting. For us, that just failed miserably. I think not so much a mistake, but I think something to be aware of is as you're growing quickly, inevitably your systems and processes will fall apart and you need to kind of rebuild them as the business grows. And I think that keeping your eye on the ball as your business kind of grows quickly as to, well, having that reporting in place so you can look at the data both from a service and operations point of view and a sales and marketing point of view, having some sort of reporting structure in place so you can start to see where the cracks are appearing, where the gaps are appearing, and you can start to address those. I think that's really important to kind of think about when you start to see that fast growth in any business. Yeah, that would be my biggest takeaway.
Thanks so much for the experience share, especially with regards to the systems and processes as well. Or mostly all the scaling businesses go through that phase. Like, when the systems crack, when the processes crack, they're like, whoa, I think so I need to scale back. All right.
No,
so
that's a good thing.
You do that. Yes. Tell us a bit more about that. Like, our audience would be more interested to learn that.
Simple sort of business process improvement. Like we used to have I always use the metaphor, you're in a car, you're driving along at 60 kilometers an hour. Suddenly you start pushing it to 80 kilometers an hour and the wheels start shaking a bit. And then you push it to 100 kilometers an hour and then the wheels just fall off. What do? Well, you need to look at building a better car that can handle the faster speeds on the highway. And so, things would happen. You'd start getting, you'd notice like you were getting more customer complaints. There might be more complaints from staff. There might be issues with your sales conversions. They're just unusual things that weren't happening before start happening. And you kind of go, well, why is this happening now? And then you just go through a bit of a business process improvement approach. And you start looking at, well, what's happening in that part of the business? Let's start talking to the team. Let's start reviewing the data. Let's start finding the gaps in the processes and understanding why this is happening, and let's fix it. So it takes quite a proactive approach. But I think at the same time, you need to look at those. When a process starts falling apart, it's a good thing because you're growing and it just means the process doesn't fit the size of the business anymore. So let's build a new process.
I like the perception. When the things are not working well, that means to say that you're growing. Don't worry about it.
Oh, hopefully you're growing.
And it's funny how we find a lot of entrepreneurs who run away from that because when things are breaking and let's scale back a little bit and let's go back and fix the problem. But it takes a unique person to think no, let's keep scaling. There's always going to be chaos when you're scaling, right? You're just going to keep going at the same time, fix things at the back as well. So
and it's generally like I always think about these things: people, process, technology, right? And the problem will always be in one or more of those three kind of silos. The people you originally hired for the role are struggling in a scaling business. So the skills that we hired them for and the tasks we hired them to do in the first place when the business was smaller is no longer, like, it's kind of, the business has outgrown those skills and we need to find other people that are more comfortable growing, working in a larger company, or we need to upskill our existing team, or we need to resource our existing team more. Process, like I discussed before, the process just doesn't fit the size of the business anymore, or technology, maybe, working on Excel spreadsheets isn't the way to go anymore and we need to actually look at a proper software system to manage that particular process or function.
Never heard that before, but I think it's so true. People, process, and technology. And one of the things, to be honest with you, for us, we scale so quickly. One of the things we are struggling now is the technology and the backend support and all that kind of stuff. So we are looking to hire a technology guy very soon as well. So it's so true. So we're just going to switch gears, Mark, and go through building the team and people very quickly. So did you have any particular thoughts or ideas to try to find the best people, the A players, as they call? Did you have any strategies while hiring or during the interview? Some companies do personality profiling and all that kind of stuff. What were you guys doing at that time?
I don't think we had too much smarts around our recruitment process. I think if it was an important role, like a senior salesperson or a senior manager, I would interview them personally. And, I always feel like I'm a pretty good read of people and how they'll perform in a role. So I kind of would go with my gut a fair bit. So I probably wouldn't, there was not much structure around that process. I think the key with recruitment is to have really clear expectations for the first 3 to 6 months of that person's tenure, and to assess their progress and ability to do the role against those criteria in the early stages, and be prepared to discontinue their employment if they're not performing in line with those expectations. I think it's really hard to assess someone's ability to do a job in that recruitment process. I think you can go, yep, they've got the skills, they've got the qualifications, they've got the experience. I think you can kind of do personality profiles until the cows come home, and it still won't be 100% accurate. So you've got to kind of draw the line between, well, how much do we want to put into this recruitment process, and how quickly do we want someone to start and actually start getting this stuff done? And I think, so my learning is clear expectations up front when you do find someone that you want to hire, because you don't have an endless pool of candidates. You never do. So you find the best person out of the pool, and then you get run with them and you train them. I think having that onboarding process and the right training and expectations in place is so important. And assessing that person's fit into the company culture, I would say. Some people might have all the skills, the qualifications and experience, but if you feel they're not going to be a fit into the business, then... Yeah. And I think that's where the gut feeling comes in. I think that's pretty hard to kind of quantitatively test. I think you kind of just need to have a conversation and go with your gut when you're working it, trying to work that out.
This is such a crucial part, the recruiting aspect of it and finding the right people. All right. And then since you have such a wide experience already in hiring and recruiting so many people, if you had to shortlist maybe 3 qualities that you're looking for really A players, for people who are high performers, in your experience, what would those be?
I think an ability to communicate with people respectfully, with people at all levels of a business. So whether that's a salesperson, clearly if it's a salesperson, they need to be able to navigate their way through prospective clients' businesses and build relationships at all levels. But at the same time, if it's an operations person and they're working in a large company, we were 450 by the time we sold, then they also need to be able to work as a team and build and manage relationships as they navigate through their role. So I think that's really important. I think a openness to learning how to do things differently to what they are accustomed to is really important. And I think just having a level head and a level of just being a reasonable person, a humble, humility is probably where I'm trying to go, a level of humility as a person. You can accept feedback on how they're doing things. They don't think that they're an expert at how they operate and do things. They can accept feedback and take on that feedback and develop as an employee. They're coachable, I guess. So coachable, respect, and an open mind when it comes to learning different ways to do things.
It's amazing how you mentioned most of them are interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
Not that many technical skills.
No.
Awesome.
Well, that would depend on the role as well, right?
Just a quick one as well, Mark, about, obviously you created up to 400 to 500 people. That takes a lot of cultural building in the back end as well. So what was your take on building the right culture? Is there anything particular you were doing with your team from the beginning to get that right?
It's a good question, and it's a challenging topic. It's particularly because the bulk of our staff were in another country. So probably out of the 450, let's say 435 of those staff were in another country, and there was a small component in Australia. And all of the seniors, well, not all of the senior staff, but, the owners, the senior salespeople, senior account managers were in Australia. If you're building an offshore team, the first thing you need to accept is that you'll be visiting them a lot if you want that to be successful. So we made the commitment to travel to the Philippines very, very regularly, spend time with the team. But not only that, we regularly measured employee satisfaction. We measured that every 3 months, did an employee satisfaction survey. We could tell from the results of that kind of how things were tracking. Were there any issues that we need to kind of delve into and learn about? We had regular things like town halls. From the beginning of the business, we set down our values, and those values flew through our employee handbook and how we conducted ourselves in the business. I think that if you're a senior person in a business, then you have to lead by example, right? So you need to kind of live and breathe the values of that business. And, some of those values are things like sophistication, continuous improvement, which is what we were really focused on as a growing business was, look, we're an outsourcing company. We felt like some of our competitors weren't as sophisticated as they could be, or professional. So we were like, well, that's going to be one of our values. Continuous improvement. We're growing fast. We need to continually be reviewing and being able to put our hand up and go, hey, look, I think this process doesn't work anymore. Why don't we do this that way instead? So, yeah, I think your values are important, living and breathing those values so that your staff and team can see that this is an important thing to do and they start to mirror how you behave. Employee satisfaction surveys are great when you've got lots of staff. It's a good litmus test to see whether things are going well or not. And if they're not, then you kind of have to investigate further, start talking to your team about, well, why is that satisfaction score lower? What's going on? Town halls, great opportunity for staff at all levels of the business to talk about any issues that they see. I think finding a way to have that high level kind of litmus test, but then also giving your staff opportunities to bring forward any ideas for improvement or any grievances that they might have or any processes that they might have identified that aren't working very well. I think that's really important. And then, like I said, the values piece is really important too.
Just adding on to that, just want to also move a little bit into finance and managing finance as well. And one of the challenges we see is, scaling profitably, right? So that's the key. That's the key thing. Some guys are amazing at sales and marketing. They just scale very quickly, and before they know it, they had no money left to spend. So what were your ways of measuring that? Any habits or anything you had on finance?
I talk about, growing and scaling in a financially sustainable way. And I think there's a few components to that. I think that we were an outsourcing company. So it would have been remiss and hypocritical of us not to adopt the outsourcing approach, which is basically find the low value tasks in your business, identify those and have low value resources do those tasks. Find the high value tasks and have your high value resources do the high value tasks. So, when you think about content marketing, for example, it's a resource intensive strategy. It takes a lot of hands and a lot of people to build out an effective content marketing engine because you constantly have to pump out content. You constantly have to pump out more than your competitors. You're constantly looking at the data and optimizing your digital assets. So you need web developers, graphic designers, marketing managers, content writers. It's a lot of work. But if you can have a lot of that sitting offshore in a low-cost economy, then it starts to make financial sense and it starts to be financially attainable to adopt that kind of marketing approach. So that's one thing. The other thing is if you're growing fast, you need to understand how much it's costing you to grow that fast. And so what I mean by that is start measuring your cost per lead and your customer acquisition cost. And no doubt, if you measure that, say, monthly, over time, you get a really good picture of how much you're investing in sales and marketing and what your return on that marketing spend is. And it also gives you the opportunity to start looking at, well, how do we optimize those two metrics? How do we reduce those over time so that we're generating good quality leads for less over time and we're bringing on great customers for less over time. And the good thing about that is it kind of translates marketing speak into finance speak, and you can start to get some alignment across your marketing function and your finance function as well.
Amazing, Mark. Now that's really important how you're able to bring in different teams together that relate so very well. Just shifting a little bit gears, what we really want to hear from you is because you manage such a big workforce, 400, 450 people. And how did you go about in having an amazing culture? Okay, because when you have such a big team and making sure things are working well, culture plays such a big role. So tell us a bit, share your experience and how do you build a culture?
Well, culture comes from the top, right? So my wife and I, we were the business owners. We had decided what our values were for the business, kind of what I touched on before. And we hired people in line with those values. And we hired people who were willing to carry those values and live and breathe those values. And I think if you do that and you build that approach into your recruitment process and strategy, and the expectation is set that all staff will live and breathe these values, then that goes a long way to building a culture. What's the saying? A behavior that's a negative behavior that's not addressed is one that's kind of accepted. And so I think that, if you're a senior person in a business and you see a junior person or even a peer conducting themselves in a way that's not in line with the culture and the values of that company, then, you need to kind of have a conversation about that. Otherwise, it will just be assumed, it's implied that sort of behavior is accepted. And then there's process stuff. Like systems and process cuts through all parts of the business. So, measuring lunch breaks and tardiness and productivity, all of these things, if you're measuring these things, it gives an indication, sends a message to the business and the people that work in it that these are important things to the business. So that's important as well. And like I said, employee engagement activities was a big thing that we focused on. Australia is a bit funny in some respects. In a typical Australian workplace, it's kind of an assumption that you go to work, you earn your wage, and then you kind of go home, and that's enough. But that's not the case in other parts of the world. Places like the Philippines, where the majority of our staff, where there's an expectation that, there's monthly events and there's parties and there's, fancy dress days and celebrations of different, religious occasions throughout the year and that sort of thing. And to become an employer of choice, you need to really think about, well, how do we wrap some really good employee engagement activities around these different events, because it's kind of expected in different parts of the world to do that. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, 100%.
So just want to also ask, Mark, everybody has a different answer to this question, but according to you, what's the one thing a CEO or a business owner is responsible for? So when he goes on a Monday morning, he's going to go back to the business. What's that one thing he should be focused on?
The vision. I think if you're a business leader, then you should be delegating all of the operational stuff to people that report to you and people that below you in the organizational structure. And I think your primary job is being that connection between the board, the investors, and the business, and driving the vision of that business.
Love that. Awesome. We can talk to you forever, Mark. I know this has been a really good chat so far, but just want to talk about, your current, what do you entrepreneurs in your coachings and things like that? So what do you exactly do with them? So if somebody wants to work with you, what they can expect from you?
My new business, our current business, is called the Flipside Group. And what our vision is, our business is to grow your business. And so we do that by taking on all of the lessons that we learned through growing our outsourcing business in the Philippines, from inception to scaling and selling it, and helping other businesses, predominantly B2B businesses, implement those learnings in their business. And then the special focus is on the front end of the business, the sales and marketing side of things. And I do that predominantly through two ways: what we call a growth diagnostic, which is an upfront piece of work that I do, where I go into a business, assess their sales and marketing processes, resourcing, strategy, review their digital assets, and identify where the areas for improvement are, and then come back with a series of recommendations on how we can improve that. Generally, again, that's across the people, process, technology elements. And then after that, because my MO is I don't want a business to have to rely on external providers in order to grow. I like to see businesses build their own internal high-performing sales and marketing capability so that they can do it themselves. And when it comes time to seeking investment or selling, it's such a powerful thing to be able to say, we consistently generate this many quality leads. We know from our sales conversions that we convert this much. We know that if we invest this much in each month into our marketing, that we will get X number of leads and X number of new customers. And we can dial that investment up and down as we see fit. That's super powerful. And it's the opposite to saying, well, we've got this agency that kind of looks after our lead gen. It's a very different proposition. And I think, you don't have a business if you don't have leads. So it should be treated, your lead generation should be treated as a primary function in your business, and it should be something that a lot of attention is focused on. So that's how we work. I do monthly coaching as well with businesses after we do the growth diagnostic. I've got a whole heap of other providers that are experts in their space that I can utilize to help improve and patch holes in people's sales and marketing functions. Yeah, so if anyone does have an interest in that, then I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Awesome. Where can they find you? I know you're pretty active on LinkedIn, so your LinkedIn, we'll put some links in the show notes as well. So
yeah,
anywhere else on there?
LinkedIn, shoot me a message, call me 0411 499 948, send me an email at mark@flipsidegroup.com.au. Yeah, I'm easy to find.
And one last question before we finish up. You did a lot of work to actually scale the business and all that kind of stuff. The last question is, was it worth scaling your business?
Of course it was. Of course it was. And I think it was kind of the intention in the first place when we started it, was to scale it. So that was always kind of part of the strategy. It's a great feeling when you sell a business.
Yes.
Suddenly you can kind of, open the pressure valve and all the pressure disappears. You've got a reward to enjoy after you've sold it too. So yeah, no regrets.
Amazing. So amazing. Really good insights, Mark. Fantastic to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Scale Your Empire. Help spread the wisdom by liking and sharing this podcast. And we'd love to hear your views in the comments. Now, go out there, take action, and elevate your empire.